Hello, I'm Anthony. Today I'm going to walk you through how I have the MediaBay configured in Cubase 13. This is the MediaBay. It's basically a database of everything you can imagine wanting to store as far as Cubase is concerned, from your projects to your audio files, your MIDI files. Literally any kind of configurable information that you might want to save can be stored and accessed from the MediaBay. Today I'm going to walk you through each of the sections of it, how it all hangs together, and some of what I think to be best practices in order to help you kind of manage this stuff, because there's so much information that can be stored in MediaBay. It really can be overwhelming and you can get very lost very easily. Hope you enjoyed this video today. Please check out the Patreon and channel member links below if you do, in order to help support my channel, carry on making these videos. All right, without further ado, let's get on with it. This symbol up here in the top in the toolbar that I'm circling, that's the MediaBay icon. Wherever you see it in Cubase, there's going to be something to do with presets. And when we click that, we open the MediaBay. As you can see, all of these windows are currently updating because I have my maximum viewable items currently set to 60,000. This is a configuration option. I'll just drop down a few of the settings, and here's the maximum item in results list. We'll come back to this a little bit later. There's a couple of other interesting things to look at there. But firstly, just kind of step back and have a think about what this thing is. The MediaBay is, as I said earlier, a repository for everything that you can possibly want to store as far as writing a musical project is concerned. We manage that database via categories, subcategories, all sorts of attributes that we use to tag our information to allow us to get to what we want as quickly as possible. And here's a word of warning: it is possible to dive deep, deep, deep into this rabbit hole. I've lost entire months of my life categorizing and rating VST presets, and a joyous time I had too, but it really is an enormous time sink. And the more time that you spend on MediaBay, the better the information is going to be, but the less time you're going to be spending writing music. So this is something that you really have to guard against getting too carried away with this stuff. It's something I'm quite often guilty of. Let's start off with the file browser on the left-hand side and draw a distinction between Steinberg core data, and that's primarily stored in the VST sound and factory content folders, and user content, presets, audio files, MIDI files that you'll have on your computer that you want to be able to access. Let's deal with the factory stuff first. VST sound is the heart and brain of Cubase. Now, in previous versions, before version 13, you were able to quite severely mess with this folder to your own harm. Unfortunately, or happily, Steinberg have finally grayed these options out. The top three, or basically everything that you can see from all media down to VST sound, we can't deselect these items anymore. You used to be able to, and I'm very, very happy that you can't, because you should never. The VST sound folder, for instance, is where all of Cubase's stock library files are stored. Now, it's just worth mentioning that if you open the VST sound folder, you can individually deselect the folders inside it. And once again, please don't. Just leave the VST folder alone. This is internal configuration stuff for Cubase. This is where all of its sounds are stored. There's really no need to permanently throw this stuff away. As I'll show you later, there's a way to kind of hide it if you don't want to see it. But just leave that folder unexpanded and essentially let it be. There's no harm in having a quick look what's in it though. If I single click on the VST sound folder, MediaBay is now updating to show a view of that folder and everything underneath. And as you can see, there are 50,304 items in the VST sound folder on my computer. That will be a function of the expansions I have installed, the likes of Hallian, Groove Agent. Basically anything to do with the Steinberg products is all going to get bundled up in here. Across the top of MediaBay is an attribute browser that allows us to filter this information, and the 6 columns that you can see across the top are configurable. Each one of these columns you can see you can drop down, and there's a whole host of different column options that you can choose. Now, I've very carefully curated these 6 headings, and this is the way that I recommend that you set up MediaBay, because it gives you really good access to lots of interesting kind of angles that you would want to think about. It's also a really good indication that VST sound is the exclusive domain of Steinberg, because in the plugin vendor column you can see only Steinberg Media Technologies exists. This is Steinberg's inner sanctum and nobody else can get access to it. We just have a look at all media, you can see all of the other companies that I have stuff installed for they don't get access to the VST sound folder. Let's have a quick look at these other column headings. Category and subcategory are by far the most common way that I search for sounds when I'm in MediaBay. If I'm looking for a synth sound, does it need to be, I find a quite sharp attack sound, in which case I'd go for synth lead. Do I want a long, slow, evolving thing, synth pad? These are all really kind of obvious categories, but subcategory as well. A lot of this stuff is really useful. As you can see, you get a greater level of granularity here. There's various different kinds of electric instruments, horns and pianos and all sorts of different items. If you want to trim this down a little bit, you could maybe start off by saying, let's just pick the synth lead. And then having chosen that primary category, everything else in the database updates to say, well, these are all of the subcategories that you can choose having started there. So category and subcategory, really good kind of top level stuff. Very, very useful. I also like to categorize stuff by plugin name. I know that I'm interested in something in PadShop, for instance. I can just select that single plugin name, and now all of the PadShop presets are available in my results window below. I'm single clicking on these items to kind of deselect them, and then you see everything again. You can also actually multi-select in these columns. If I select PadShop, and then I'll just kind of let that finish doing its thing. And then I'm going to hold the Control key down on my keyboard and also select Groove Agent. You can see that I've just multi-selected those two options, and the results view updates accordingly. Instead of deselecting each one of those items, I can click the little Reset Filter button, and that sends us back to my default position. The next column along is rating, something else that I find really, really useful. In order to make this even more valuable, because I only really use ratings for plugin presets, I'm going to make this view a little bit more discrete. At the moment, it's looking at everything across all sorts of different audio types. But now I'm going to head into my media types filter at the top of MediaBay, and I'm just going to select plugin presets. And then I need to shut this box down. I can either click in the cross or just click out of it. Now MediaBay is updated to only show me preset rating information. Now I actually only have 3 different kinds of ratings that I will give to presets, and the numbers are 2, 4, and 5. I'll explain why in a moment. Let's just go up to all media. Okay, so I've just said that I use 3 ratings, and yet you can see there are 4 here. Let me explain myself. 2-star is sounds I'm not interested in. So these are presets that I've listened to at some point in the past. And from inside MediaBay, I've said, I don't want to hear you again. That's what 2-star means to me. It means I'm not really very interested. 4-star is my stock. That's a good sound. I like it. I'm going to want to hear that again. And 5-star are the cream of the cream. So if I set a rating of 5 stars, it means this is a sound I'm going to go back to repeatedly. They're my absolutely core sounds. The other rating that you can see, 3 stars, is predominantly Steinberg stuff. When you get a VST instrument from Steinberg, by default, they set every preset to 3 stars, which as far as I'm concerned, renders that number useless. I've not rated it 3 stars. I've got nothing to do with that rating. I don't want it to be 3 stars. And so I've had to basically permanently discard 3 stars as a usable item. If you see it anywhere in my system, it means I simply haven't rated it. And so I suppose technically I do have a 4th rating, and that is unrated, and that's what 3 stars means. So that's my personal system, and it works really well, only in the context of Steinberg stuff, because they insist on rating their own sounds as 3 stars. Okay, that's enough with ratings, let's move on. Character at the end is, I use this less, but I do use it occasionally. I might be going for a particular style of sound. Glass is a good example. Let's just get rid of this 3-star rating. Get everything back again, and then select glass. So now all of these sounds have that character attribute that's been tagged onto the sound. If I'm looking for something that's very bright and brittle, I might start off in that direction. So again, another really good filter. So I highly recommend those 6 columns across the top. They work really well. All of that is in the context of an attribute search. It is possible to switch over to logical search, and then you can perform Boolean operations. So now you're looking for specific text inside these items. So if I click on the attribute box, here are all of the selectable attributes that you can pick. This kind of text-based searching I just think is unnecessary these days. The attribute tagging is so good inside Cubase. I pretty much never use logical searches, but essentially you would choose your attribute, choose what kind of Boolean operation you want to perform on it, and then type your text in this string box. It does work, and it's very powerful in terms of very complex searches that you can do, but really that's not the way that I'm thinking when I'm writing music. I'm thinking far more holistically than this, and my attribute searches do me really well. Now down into the results window below. Let's say we're looking for a piano sound, so I'll choose the piano primary category, and I want something, let's say warm. I'll choose my warm character. So now I've got, 95 different presets to choose from. The result set that appears in this lower window, all of these various column headings, are dependent upon your currently selected media type filter. So as you can see, we're looking at plugin presets here. So you see these particular character tags. Every different kind of media type can have an individual result set defined in this window. Now this isn't immediately obvious when you're configuring the setup, but this is how it works. I've just clicked this little cog, this settings cog, where it says set up result columns. This is where we define the columns that appear in this lower window. And as you can see, these numbers in the brackets at the end of each kind of tagging category tell you how this result set is being collected together. So if we go down to the media section, for instance, here's name and rating. There's the name column, there's the rating column. I can pick these things up and move them wherever I want. I can configure these results columns, like I say, on a per filter basis. So let's just choose a random one that sticks out as like a sore thumb. Let's say staff artist. Now, every time I choose plugin presets, that column is going to be added to the result set. So I'm going to come away and then come back to my plugin presets. When the results come up, if I scroll across, here's the artist column at the end. So MediaBay remembers your preferences, your options for each one of these file type filters. And every time you look in the results box, you'll see a different set of results and it'll be constantly confusing you. A lot of that is perfectly reasonable because context is everything. You want different tags for an audio file, for instance, for a WAV file, than you would for a MIDI file. So it's totally reasonable to have selectable configurations. A couple of these options down at the bottom are worth mentioning though. Use defaults allows us to set back to a factory preset. There's nothing we can do about defining these defaults. I would personally like to be able to define them, but you can't. If I select use defaults on plugin presets, we're going to go back to the core 1233 option. There's a really useful context sensitive feature though called all available. Depending on what you've currently got selected in the results list, if I say all available, it will show me sufficient columns to display every tag where something is populated in one of the items in this result set. So now if we go in, you can see there are many more columns defined because across these 95 results that have been accumulated, this is what's necessary in order to display all of that information. So now if I scroll across, you won't find a column that's completely blank. See, channels looks blank, but if I scroll down far enough, I'm going to find something that's populated. Now it's worth mentioning, every time you click all available, you lose your previously defined kind of hand-picked items for that thing. There's no way to basically kind of save these configuration options. The only choice from this point, for instance, would be to go use defaults, which is going to give me the, 1233. That's what you're going to get every time, regardless of what you're looking at. I deselect this piano option and go back in. It's still going to say 1233. Now I want to move on from result column headings fairly shortly, but there's one other thing that I want to mention because it confused me mightily when I first came across this. If you have multiple selections specified, so here I've selected audio files and plugin presets, that specific combination of exactly those two options can be configured with its own properties. So let's say we'll give this a 266 and then we'll stick a 1 in track template as well. Now, exactly audio files plus plugin presets is going to have these result columns every time I choose that combination of sounds again. Take one of them away. We're back to the default category for just audio files. put plugin presets back, and there's my track template come back. So I think that's a little bit over egging the pudding. I don't really want that many different combinations of result choices, particularly because I can't save this configuration as a kind of master option somewhere. The moment I click all available, I'm going to lose all of that information and it's gone. So I'm not going to spend an enormous amount of time configuring all of these result sets if I can't save it as a permanent, Anthony MediaBay options kind of thing. Now, there's a takeaway from this. We're talking about best practice. My best practice is when I'm doing searches on MediaBay, I try very hard to have my media types on a single filter option at all times. This keeps my result options really clean, and then I know where I stand, and I get some sort of familiarity with this result set rather than it basically changing its view every 2 minutes, me not being able to keep up with what I'm looking at. I am a bear of very simple brain. Simple is best is like an absolutely fundamental concept to me. This aspect of Cubase is a bit overcomplicated, but you don't have to use it, so it's all good. It's time now to talk about configuration of our own data. We talked about Steinberg having exclusive access to the VST sound and factory content folders. I've just realized I didn't define the difference between them. VST sound is absolutely core, baked into the application stuff. Factory content is Steinberg presets that can be manipulated. So for instance, here's the chord pads presets. If we get rid of all of our filter types so that we can see everything, I had to click on 2 different filter resets there, by the way. I went up to all media types and then I reset my attribute filters, and now I get to see all of the stuff down below. So these happen to be the chord pad options. I'm not going to describe everything in MediaBay, we'd be here forever. You can also see these little icons. Lots of different kinds of data have different sorts of icons. So this happens to be the chord pad icon. If we click down some of these, you'll see now this symbol here is used quite frequently. This is like a generic plugin preset icon. In this context, it's being used to describe FX chain presets, which would be things like collections of maybe a compressor plus an EQ, something like that. But you will see this icon in multiple different places. Just have a look at another couple to see some of the differences. Here's a MIDI loop icon. So a MIDI loop is like a MIDI file plus a sound, a plug-in sound, and those two things are combined together to give you a very rich kind of effect. Pattern banks are rhythms developed in a bespoke Steinberg application called Beat Designer, and they have their own icon as well. So all of these different icons, as you're browsing around MediaBay, you become familiar with them. There's one pair of icons that are very difficult to identify, and I've had to work out empirically what I think they mean because I've not been able to find a definition for them anywhere. If we have a look in plugin presets and we let that results set refresh, you're going to see 2 different symbols. You're going to see these white hexagons, a big hexagon with a small, could be a hexagon, could be a circle. But if I scroll down far enough, you'll see a different symbol as well, this square symbol, and nowhere explains the difference between those 2 symbols. That annoyed me. So I had to figure out kind of empirically what they mean. The white hexagon is either a non-Steinberg product, a non-Steinberg preset. Let's say I've loaded up an Arturia instrument and I save that preset. It's going to get this symbol. Or a Steinberg multi-program. I'm going to show you an example of a Steinberg multi-program. If I go to Groove Agent, I find one of these. I'm going to drag this into Cubase. Microphone cuts out on me, as it always does when I'm loading up an instrument. And now, if we have a look in Groove Agent, multiple kits. So this is a multi-instrument. So the white symbol in Steinberg's parlance is a multi-instrument, but in every other manufacturer, it's a single instance preset. The white box is exclusively for Steinberg's use. Non-Steinberg vendors don't get to use this symbol. And in Steinberg sensors, it's basically a single plugin instance, a regular preset. So I've got a Groove Agent 1 selected here. Let's load that up into Cubase. And now when I open Groove Agent, a nice simple single instance kit. Absolutely no idea why they've created 2 icons. It's like, this is our special icon and you don't get to use it. But sometimes when they use the white icon, they use it for a different purpose. Absolutely bizarre, but that's what it is. I cannot stand a mystery like that. I have to solve it. Right, I said we'd talk about user configuration and then got myself distracted on a rant. Let's open this computer and I'm going to go to the S disk. On the S disk, I have a folder. Well, it's called the sample data disk, but actually inside the sample data disk is a folder called core samples. This is where I have all of my sample information. So every audio file that I'm interested in is stored on my sample drive. And here you can see the top level categories. Now, saying top level categories, that's true. I organize all of my samples by type. So if we open the drums and percussion, for instance, you'll see all the different kinds of percussion. So whenever I come across audio files that meet one of those criteria, I'll throw them. If I get some new gong sounds, for instance, they'll go into the gong folder. But that's not always the case. Sometimes I've got a load of sample files and I've not got around to listening to them and figuring out where they're going to go. And this Slate Digital folder is a perfect example of that. These are samples that I got as part of my Slate Digital subscription. And so I've got these samples on my computer, but I haven't yet figured out where they're going to live. At some point in the future, I'm going to want to move them. So let's show you an example of a little bit of housekeeping in MediaBay. I open the Slate Digital folder. This folder, 808 Deep Dive, is going to be great because this is obviously going to be a Roland TR-808, the drum kit sounds. So let's just clear all of my filters so that we can see them. And here we go, we've got 3 bass sounds in here. Let's select one of these. Now I have a problem with my particular kind of setup. It's actually very difficult recording with Cubase. Cubase kind of grabs the audio driver and you have to kind of jump through hoops to do these YouTube videos. One of the unfortunate side effects of it is that I can't play you previews of sounds inside MediaBay. If I engage this button called Auto Play New Results, what it's essentially going to do is play this bass loop round on a cycling basis. Now, when it gets round to the beginning, you probably can't hear that. I can hear the preview, but it doesn't actually get to the outside world. It doesn't get to OBS. That's just a kind of weird quirk of me recording, but just suffice to say that this preview option is really good. As you select each audio file, once again, I can now hear that new sample playing in my headphones. I'll drag it into Cubase so that we can actually hear it together. Just going to pick this up, throw it into Cubase, and here's the audio file, and jump to it. There's the audio, there's the bass line that I'm listening to in the previewer. Okay, so we've got these 808 bass lines, and let's say I've listened to them and I'm happy to put them in my sample library. So I want to now move these bass lines to where they're supposed to live. In the drums and percussion folder, I have this section called named kits. Let's open that. And when I was preparing for this video, I saw there was an ugly thing. There's an 808 folder, but there's also a Roland TR-808. So that's on my to-do list to fix. But I'm going to move these bass lines into this, or these bass sounds into the 808 folder. So I can pick it up, drag it across, and it's going to ask me, do I want to copy or move? In this case, I'm going to move because I don't want it in the old location anymore. So I click move. Now this is unfortunate. That move has been successful. The file is no longer in its original location, but the MediaBay doesn't immediately update. Even if I click update results, the baseline basically kind of sticks there. What I need to do is rescan the disk. If I'm right click on my new location and say rescan disk, then MediaBay, it's just looking at that folder, but it has now properly updated itself. And here it is, bass raw, sat down at the bottom of the folder. So if you're doing this moving around inside the MediaBay, which is totally reasonable, all of this is perfectly viable, the MediaBay is very slow to update itself. You can see the original location hasn't updated either. I'd need to re-click and say rescan this disk as well. MediaBay has a kind of background process where this stuff kind of does catch up eventually. Everything gets kind of sorted out. But on an instant basis, when you're working with it, it really should update immediately, and it doesn't. This result set, you can see that was the time it took to rescan the disk and sort its life out. So this is an example of me managing my audio files in my sample library folder, moving them around and categorizing them. And as I say, I store everything by category. I'm not interested in the library that it came from. I'm only interested in what the sound sounds like. There are a couple of other locations on my PC that I need to know about though, not just the sample drive. If we have a look in the documents folder, this is as good a time as any to explain the iconography here. So a square inside a square means at least one subfolder is excluded. In other words, everything inside the C hard disk folder is not an inherent part of the MediaBay. And that completely makes sense. I don't want the vast majority of my C drive to be scanned every time I open MediaBay. In fact, a very small subset of folders have any content stored. So a yellow folder means that some of the subfolders inside, for instance, program data, store MediaBay information. So if we click in there, we can see that only the Steinberg folder is visible. So where are the others? I mean, my program folder's got like tons of stuff in, not just Steinberg. This is a really nice filter option. It's in settings at the top of the window. I'll just drag this across. And it's called hide folders that are not scanned. I have that engaged and it's really nice. You can only really turn this on once you've done all of your configuration, and then you don't need to see anything else anymore. If I turn it off, then we'll see like the true state of my documents folder here. And a little bit further down, here's my program files folder. And again, tons of stuff in there that Steinberg is not interested in, Cubase is not interested in. So we basically just hide all of that stuff and we get a really clean view of MediaBay. This is a much nicer thing to work with. Inside the documents folder are a couple of places that are really important. The VST3 presets folder, you really need MediaBay to be able to see that. This is where all of the presets that you've configured and stored, well, on a PC at least, they get stored in here. So you can see all of the various different manufacturers have their own primary folders. So these ticks mean fully scanned. Everything inside this folder and all of the subfolders, because it's white, that means the entire folder and its hierarchy, they've all been imported. A single folder in here, and here are the presets for that particular plugin. Because my setup is so simple, I don't need to particularly worry about favorites. In fact, I only have a single favorite on my computer. It's my core samples folder on the S drive. So I've explicitly set that up as a favorite. If you have a more complex hierarchy of folders, you might want to utilize favorites a little bit more comprehensively. But basically, if you right click on a folder, you can say add to favorite, and then it'll pop up in this little drop down box at the top, and you can kind of get instant access to it from there. Omnisphere has thousands upon thousands of presets. I have listened to the vast majority of them over a period of longer than I'm prepared to admit. And over the course of that time, every time I came across something that I thought sounded really great, I explicitly saved it in MediaBay. So let's say I've got this megaphone piano sound and I want to store this one. Absolutely, who doesn't want a megaphone piano? So I'm now going to save that preset so that MediaBay can see it. So I'm going to say save preset. Here are all of my current Omnisphere presets that I've already manually saved inside Cubase. You don't get any of this in MediaBay for free. So I'm going to say megaphone piano. And now I'm going to categorize this sound. So what is it? Well, I'm going to choose my category and subcategory first. And there's a little hack here. You just choose subcategory and category will come along free for the ride. So let's say it's an acoustic piano other. Let's give it a rating. If I'm rating Steinberg stuff, that might potentially get a 2. That's how I kind of hide that stuff, take it out the way. But if I'm explicitly saving a preset, it means I already like it. Why am I going to save a preset and then say I don't want to hear this again? So let's say I've given it 4 stars. And now I can give it some character tags as well if I want. Now you could spend quite easily 10 minutes on this, going through all of these various character tags and choosing the different kinds of character tags that you want to assign to the sound. I'll just choose a couple for the example. We say OK, and that's it. That preset's now ready to save. I can shut Omnisphere down. Now when I go back into MediaBay and do a search for megaphone, it will already have found it. Like I say, MediaBay is constantly updating. And there it is, megaphone piano. So this is the Omnisphere preset that was previously invisible to MediaBay. MediaBay can now see it. I've dragged it into the Cubase world. And this is where, like I say, here's the 4 stars with the processed and bright. This is just such a deep joy for any incurable sorter. And every now and again, I do get the sorting mood on me, and I'm going to want to do this stuff. It's not just when you're saving presets that you have the opportunity to update this stuff as well. You can make updates directly in the results window. If we have the settings option, allow editing in results list set, then I can do exactly that. So for instance, if I want to categorize this with a particular substyle, I can go in and say experimental electronic art music. There you go. It's not a particularly, I'll say new music. And now that tag's been added to that file. On the right-hand side, you have the attribute inspector, which allows you to see a really rich and kind of fully featured detail of this preset. If you want to see it in the results window, you have to scroll across, and it's a bit kind of cumbersome to do that. Whereas this is your uniquely tailored window on this sound. And here you can see all of the tags that you're interested in. Dynamic, for the most part, is where you want to live. It's really good. It shows you the stuff that you're highly likely to be most interested in. But you can define your own categories. And again, this is on a per type basis. So let's say if I want to define which categories I'm interested in seeing for plugin types, for plugin presets, whatever I have selected in the results window, I didn't particularly need to choose this filter. Whatever is selected in this window down below, I open the settings cog in the attribute inspector, it says configure the defined attributes. I'm going to open it up, and you can see that it's pre-selected presets for me. It knows I'm currently looking at a preset. And so it said, all right, what tags do you want? And now you can see the full list of all preset tags. And I can individually choose what I want to see in this attribute inspector when I go into it. Now remember earlier when I said combinations of media types have their own configuration? In the media types dropdown, you can basically, it's almost infinite. Any two of these options that you choose, you're specifically configuring exactly those options. In the attribute inspector, that's not the case. You have a single mixed media types option, and this is what you've got when you get mixed media types. Another reason why, in my personal opinion, mixed media types are not the way to go in MediaBay. Try to work on a single type at a time, and your life will be much simpler. So as you can tell, MediaBay is one of the most customizable, one of the most personal kind of choice systems that you're going to have in Cubase. This is how I have mine set up. Hope you found the video useful. Please hit like if you did. I'll see you next time. Thanks very much.